Your son will not fit in at SeaWorld. Our kids planned this for months, and yours just does not belong. My sister Vanessa sent that text to our family group chat at 7:30 on a Saturday morning. She added a heart emoji, as if that softened the blow. She had no idea that my son Jalen was sitting right across from me counting the crumpled $1 bills he had earned delivering newspapers at 4 in the morning for the last 6 months. I looked at his proud smile, and then I looked back at the phone screen. I typed 3 words. I get it. Then I set the phone down and logged into my work computer. My family thinks I am a data entry clerk. They do not know I am a forensic accountant who specializes in finding hidden assets for high net worth divorces. They do not know I have access to their credit reports, their bank statements, and the dark secrets they keep in their financial closets. I booked the ultimate VIP experience for Jalen and me. It cost $73,000. And when my family arrived at the gate thinking they were royalty, I made sure they realized they were just the court jesters. Before I tell you how I turned their dream vacation into a financial nightmare, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to remind someone exactly who signed their paychecks. I sat in my living room sipping black coffee from a mug Jalen had made me in pottery class. The morning sun was just starting to filter through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my condo in downtown Chicago. My furniture is minimalist. Cream leather, low-profile tables, and abstract art that appreciates in value every year. I do not like clutter. I like clarity. That is why I am good at my job. I see the numbers that other people try to hide. But in that moment, the only numbers that mattered were the ones Jalen was smoothing out on the glass coffee table. Jalen is 12 years old. He does not have the newest Jordans. He does not have a PlayStation 5. He wears glasses that slide down his nose, and he likes to read about marine biology. For the last 6 months, he has woken up every single morning while it was still pitch black outside to ride his bike and throw newspapers onto porches. He saved every dime. He put it all in an old coffee tin he kept under his bed. "Mom, look," he said, looking up at me with eyes that shone brighter than any diamond I had ever audited. I counted it 3 times. $350. That is enough for the ticket and lunch. You do not have to pay for anything. My heart swelled and broke at the same time. He was so proud. He wanted to pay his own way to the family trip. He wanted to buy his own ticket to see the orcas. He did not know that $350 was barely enough for parking and a souvenir in the world my sister Vanessa lived in. But to him it was a fortune. It was freedom. I reached out and brushed a piece of lint off his shoulder. "You worked so hard, baby," I said. "I am so proud of you. You are going to have the best time." He grinned, pushing his glasses up. "I am going to buy a plush chamois for Grandma Beatrice," he said. "She said she loves whales." He was thinking of them. He was thinking of buying a gift for the grandmother who constantly criticized his hair and asked why he could not be more charismatic like his cousins. He was pure, and they did not deserve him. My phone vibrated against the glass table. It was a harsh buzzing sound that cut through the peaceful morning. The screen lit up. New message from Family First group chat. I picked it up. The preview showed Vanessa's name. My stomach tightened. It was an instinctual reaction, a Pavlovian response to years of passive-aggressive digs and backhanded compliments. I unlocked the phone and opened the chat. The message was long. It was thoughtful in the way a sniper is thoughtful when lining up a shot. "Monique, we need to talk about the Orlando trip," Vanessa wrote. "Kyle and I have been discussing the logistics. We booked the platinum package for our kids. It is very exclusive. The other families coming are from Kyle's country club. To be honest, Jalen just won't fit in. He is a sweet kid, but he is a little rough around the edges. Our kids do not want to spend the whole trip explaining things to him or feeling embarrassed because he does not have the right gear. It is better if he sits this one out. Maybe you can take him to the public water park near your apartment instead." I stared at the words. Rough around the edges. She was talking about my son. She was talking about the boy who just offered to buy our mother a gift with his hard-earned money. She was calling him an embarrassment because he did not wear designer labels. I felt a cold fury rising in my chest. It started in my stomach and moved up to my throat like bile. I remembered last Christmas. I remembered Vanessa crying in my kitchen because she needed $2,000 for an emergency. She said it was for a medical bill. I gave it to her because that is what you do for family. 2 days later, she posted a photo on Instagram with a brand new Gucci bag. The caption read, "Blessed and highly favored." She was wearing my money on her arm while calling my son rough. I looked at Jalen. He was stacking the bills into neat piles, oblivious to the fact that his aunt had just tried to erase him from the family portrait. I knew in that moment that I was not going to argue. I was not going to beg. Arguing is for people who do not have power. Begging is for people who do not have options. I had both. I looked at the phone again. Kyle, her husband, had liked the message. My mother, Beatrice, had replied with a praying hands emoji. They were all in on it. They all agreed that Jalen was not good enough. They thought I was the broke single mom who needed their charity to tag along. They had no idea that I had just closed a case that netted my firm a $4 million bonus. They had no idea that the lease on Kyle's flashy SUV was co-signed by me 5 years ago when his credit score was in the trash. I typed my reply. I kept it simple. I kept it cold. I get it, I wrote. I watched the bubbles appear as they typed back. They sent hearts. They sent smiley faces. They thought I was agreeing to stay home. They thought I was accepting my place at the bottom of the totem pole. I put the phone down. I looked at Jalen. "Pack your bags, baby," I said, my voice steady. "We are going on a trip." He looked confused. "To the water park?" "No," I said, standing up and walking toward my home office. "We are going to Orlando. But we are not going with them. We are going to show them what real VIP looks like." I walked into my office and woke up my 3 monitors. The screens glowed with spreadsheets and bank ledgers. I was not just a mother anymore. I was the auditor. And I was about to conduct the most painful audit of their lives. My thumb hovered over the call icon on my phone screen. I could feel the heat radiating from my skin, a physical manifestation of the rage boiling in my blood. I did not text back. I needed to hear her say it. I needed to hear the audacity in her voice. I pressed the button. The phone rang twice before Vanessa picked up. "Hey, sis," she answered. Her voice was light, breathless, the way she sounded after her third mimosa. In the background, I could hear the distinct clatter of silverware against china and the low hum of a busy restaurant. They were at brunch. Of course they were at brunch. They were probably sitting on a patio somewhere spending money they did not have, judging people who actually worked for a living. "Vanessa," I said, keeping my voice dangerously low. "What do you mean Jalen does not fit in? He is your nephew. He is 12 years old. Since when does a child need to fit in to see a dolphin?" "Oh, Monique, do not be so sensitive," she sighed, the ice in her glass tinkling as she moved the phone. "It is not personal. It is just logistics. Hold on, let me put you on speaker. Kyle wants to explain the situation to you. He explains it better than I do." There was a rustling sound, and then the hollow echo of the speakerphone filled my living room. "Listen, Monique," Kyle's voice boomed. It was loud and performative, the voice of a man who thought everyone in the room wanted to hear his opinion. "We are just being practical here. We booked the Elite Ambassador Tour. It is 5 stars all the way. It is not just about looking at fish. It is about the private dining. It is about the networking with the other families on the tour. These are high net worth individuals, Monique." I gripped the phone tighter. My knuckles turned white. What does that have to do with my son Kyle? Kyle chuckled, a dry, condescending sound. "Look, let's be real. Jalen is a good kid, sure. But he is a little rough around the edges." Rough around the edges. The phrase hung in the air like a slap. He shows up in those second-hand t-shirts and those sneakers that have clearly seen better days. Kyle continued, his voice dripping with arrogance. "It throws off the vibe. We are trying to project a certain image here, We want the kids to bond, and frankly, our kids are used to a certain standard. This is a trip for the upper-class Monique. It is not a charity summer camp. We do not want to spend the whole weekend explaining to him which fork to use or why he cannot wear basketball shorts to the gala dinner. It would just be embarrassing. For everyone. Mostly for him. The blood rushed to my ears. The audacity was suffocating. This man, this mediocrity of a man who had needed my signature to lease his car, was calling my son a charity case. He was judging my son's worth by the label on his shirt. I opened my mouth to scream. I was ready to unleash the full force of my fury. I was ready to tell Kyle exactly whose credit score was funding his lifestyle. I was ready to burn their brunch to the ground. "You listen to me," I started to shout. But the words died in my throat. The air left my lungs in a rush. I looked up. Jalen was standing in the doorway of his bedroom. He was still wearing his faded pajama pants. He was holding his cracked piggy bank with both hands clutching it against his chest like a shield. He was not crying. He was not pouting. He was just standing there, looking at me with eyes that were suddenly far too old for his 12-year-old face. He had heard every word. He had heard his aunt dismiss him. He had heard his uncle call him rough and embarrassing. He had heard them confirm his worst fear that he was not good enough. The silence in my living room was heavier than any scream. I lowered the phone slowly, my heart breaking into a million jagged pieces on the floor. The silence in the room was worse than the shouting. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of my lungs. I watched my son. He did not throw himself on the floor. He did not scream that it was unfair. He did not act like a child who had just been robbed of his dream. He acted like a miniature adult who had already learned that the world was a cruel place. He walked over to the glass coffee table. His footsteps were soft on the rug. He reached out and began to gather the piles of money he had just finished counting. The $1 bills, the $5 bills, the currency of early mornings and freezing fingers. He stacked them neatly. He aligned the edges with a precision that made my stomach turn. Then he picked up the old ceramic piggy bank. It had a jagged crack running down the side where he had dropped it 2 years ago, and we had taped it back together with blue painter tape because we did not want to spend money on a new one. He slid the money back into the slot, one bill at a time. The sound of the paper sliding against the ceramic was soft, but to me, it sounded like a knife scraping against my ribs. He finished. He set the pig back down on the table. He adjusted his glasses, which had slid down his nose again. He looked me in the eye and he smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was a brave smile. It was the smile of a boy trying to protect his mother from her own pain. "It is okay, Mom," he said. His voice was steady. Too steady. "I do not really like whales anyway. They are probably boring. I think I will just save the money for books. Or maybe a new calculator for school." He was lying. He had a poster of an orca above his bed. He had checked out every book on marine biology from the library. He had watched the documentary about SeaWorld 3 times. He loved whales more than he loved ice cream. He was lying to make me feel better. He was lying because he thought he was the problem. He thought his clothes were the problem. He thought his existence was the inconvenience. He was internalizing their cruelty and turning it into his own inadequacy. I felt something inside my chest shatter. It was the last remnant of my patience. It was the last piece of the little sister who just wanted to get along. It turned to dust and then it turned to stone. My heart did not just break. It calcified. It became a cold, hard diamond of rage. I looked at my son who was too good for this family. I looked at his worn-out sneakers and his brave face. "Come here, baby," I whispered. I pulled him into a hug. I held him so tight I thought I might crush him. I buried my face in his neck so he would not see the look in my eyes. It was not a look of defeat. It was a look of war. "You are right," I said into his hair, my voice thick. "Books are better, but we are not done yet." I let him go. I watched him walk back into his room and gently close the door. I turned back to the phone on the table. The screen was still glowing with the group chat. They were probably laughing. They were probably ordering another round of mimosas, thinking the problem was solved. They had made my son feel small. Now I was going to make them disappear. I picked up the phone. The group chat was still open. The messages from Vanessa and Kyle were sitting there, arrogant and dismissive, glowing in blue and gray bubbles. They were expecting a fight. They were expecting me to argue, to plead, to try and convince them that Jalen was worthy of their presence. They were ready to list all the reasons why we were not good enough. I did not give them the satisfaction. I typed 3 words. I get it. I hit send. Almost immediately, the reactions started popping up. A heart from Vanessa, a thumbs up from Kyle, a smiley face from my mother Beatrice. They were relieved. They thought I had accepted my place. They thought I had looked in the mirror and agreed with their assessment that I was less than. They thought I was retreating to my corner to lick my wounds. I watched the little icons appear one by one. Each heart felt like an insult. Each thumbs up felt like a dismissal. They were celebrating their victory. They were happy that they didn't have to deal with the awkwardness of having their poor relations tagging along on their luxury vacation. I set the phone down on the table screen side down. The vibration stopped. The noise stopped. The room was quiet again. I walked over to my desk. It was a sleek, modern setup with 3 monitors and a high-performance laptop. I sat down in my ergonomic chair and woke the system up. The screens flared to life, illuminating the room with the cool blue light of data. Spreadsheets filled the monitors, bank statements, credit reports, asset allocations. This was my world. This was where I had power. My family saw a single mother who drove a Honda and lived in a modest apartment. They saw someone who clipped coupons and shopped at discount stores. They saw what I wanted them to see. They didn't see the forensic accountant who had just uncovered a $20 million embezzlement scheme for a Fortune 500 company. They didn't see the woman who commanded a billing rate of $500 an hour. They didn't see the investment portfolio that had been quietly compounding interest for the last 10 years. I logged into my secure banking portal. The balance stared back at me. It was a number with a lot of zeros, a number that could buy Vanessa's house 3 times over, a number that could pay off Kyle's debts and still leave enough for a comfortable retirement. I opened a new tab. I typed in the URL for the exclusive travel concierge service that only accepts clients by referral. The page loaded, a black background with gold lettering. Welcome, Miss Williams. I clicked on destinations. Orlando. I scrolled past the standard packages. I scrolled past the VIP packages. I went straight to the section labeled Private Access. I selected the Ultimate Marine Experience, private villa inside the park, after-hours access to the exhibits, private dining with the executive chef, personal guide, helicopter transfer from the airport. The price tag was $73,000. I didn't flinch. I didn't hesitate. I clicked Book Now. You think I am poor? I whispered to the empty room, my voice low and dangerous. You think Jalen is rough around the edges. I entered my payment information. The confirmation screen appeared. Fine. Let us see how you like the view from the cheap seats. I closed the laptop with a snap. The game was on, and I was playing to win. Sunday dinner at Deacon James and Mother Beatrice's house was never just a meal. It was a theatrical production of piety and pretension designed to convince the neighbors and the congregation that the family was blessed and highly favored. I pulled my 10-year-old Honda into the driveway, parking behind Kyle's leased BMW and my father's Cadillac that spent more time in the shop than on the road. I took a deep breath. I was walking into the lion's den, and I was intentionally wearing a lamb's costume. I walked up the front steps, passing the concrete lion statues that guarded the porch. My father had bought them at a yard sale and spray-painted them gold. They were chipping, peeling, revealing the gray concrete underneath. It was a perfect metaphor for everything that lived inside these walls. Inside, the air smelled of pot roast, lemon pledge polish, and heavy judgment. My parents lived in a museum of almost. The furniture in the formal living room was covered in thick, clear plastic runners. My mother claimed it was to preserve the investment for future generations. I knew it was because they could not afford to steam clean the velvet if someone spilled sweet tea. On the wall, a velvet painting of the Last Supper hung right next to a glass display case filled with my mother's handbag collection. Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Gucci. All of them fake. All of them bought from a trunk in a parking lot but displayed like holy relics next to the Messiah. Mother Beatrice met me at the door. She was wearing a hat that was too big for the room and a dress that was too tight for her comfort. She looked me up and down. Her eyes lingered on my plain gray t-shirt and dark jeans. She curled her lip in that familiar expression of disappointment that used to make me cry when I was a child. Monique. She sighed, shaking her head, the feathers on her hat trembling. Is that what you are wearing to the Lord's table? You look like you just came from cleaning someone's house. We have guests coming. Kyle and Vanessa are here. You could have at least put on a blouse. You are embarrassing the family. I did not tell her that my t-shirt was cashmere and cost $400. I did not tell her that my jeans were raw Japanese denim that I had tailored in Milan. To Beatrice, if it did not have a logo the size of a dinner plate, it had no value. I was the poor daughter. The disappointment. The one who needed to be reminded of her place. I smiled. It was a small, tight smile that did not reach my eyes. I am sorry, Mama. I said, my voice meek. I have been working a lot. I did not have time to change. I just wanted to see everyone. She huffed and turned around, her heels clacking on the linoleum. Well, come in then, but sit at the end of the table near the kitchen door. We do not want you ruining the aesthetic in the family photos. Kyle is wearing his new suit. Try not to stand too close to him. I followed her in. I walked past the plastic-covered chairs and the counterfeit bags. I walked past the Bible that was open on the coffee table to a page about charity but never read. I was the spy in the house of cards. I was the only real thing in the room, and they were too blind to see it. I waited until everyone was seated. Kyle sat at the head of the table like a king on a throne. Vanessa sat next to him, preening in a dress that was 2 sizes too small. My father sat opposite Kyle, looking tired but proud, as if he had personally orchestrated this union of mediocrity. I sat at the far end near the kitchen door, just as I was told. The table was set with the good china, the plates with the gold rim that we were not allowed to touch when we were kids. There was roast chicken, collard greens, and macaroni and cheese. It smelled like home, but it felt like a battlefield. I cleared my throat. The sound was small, but it cut through the chatter about Kyle's golf game. Mama, I said, my voice quiet but steady. I wanted to talk about the trip. About Jalen. The table went silent. Forks stopped mid-air. Vanessa rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Kyle let out a loud, dramatic sigh and leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. Here we go, Vanessa muttered, always making it about her. Beatrice set her fork down. She adjusted her hat, which was still on her head even though we were inside. She looked at me with that familiar mix of pity and annoyance. Monique, honey, we already discussed this in the group chat, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Why are you bringing it up now? We are trying to have a nice family dinner. Because he is your grandson, Mama, I said, my hands gripping the edge of the table. He heard everything. He heard Kyle call him rough. He was counting his money this morning. He saved $350 from delivering papers. He wanted to buy his own ticket. And you all decided he was not good enough to sit in the same section as you. Beatrice sighed again, a long, suffering sound that suggested I was the most unreasonable person on earth. She reached out and patted my hand, but her touch was cold. Baby, you are being emotional, she said. You need to look at the bigger picture. Your sister is married to a white man now. Kyle has a reputation to uphold. He has business partners on this trip, high-class people. We cannot have Jalen running around looking like he does. It is about presentation, Monique. You know how people judge. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Besides, do not be selfish. This is Vanessa's time to shine. She finally made it. She got out. We need to support her. Jalen will be fine. There is a public water park down the street from the hotel. The tickets are only $15. He can splash around there. It is more his speed anyway. He would probably be bored at the VIP dinner. They serve escargot honey. Jalen likes hot dogs. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had taught me to pray, who had taught me to be proud of who I was. And I realized she did not believe any of it. She believed in status. She believed in appearances. She believed that lighter skin and a white husband were the only tickets out of her own insecurity. She was willing to sacrifice her grandson's dignity on the altar of Kyle's ego. $15, I repeated, my voice flat. You want my son to go to a $15 water park while you all eat escargot? Beatrice shrugged, picking up her fork. It is just water, Monique. Wet is wet. Do not ruin dinner over it. Pass the cornbread. I passed the cornbread, but inside I was already burning the house down. Kyle wiped a smudge of grease from his chin with a linen napkin. He leaned back in his chair, the wood groaning under his weight. He took a sip of sweet tea and looked around the table, making sure everyone was paying attention. He was about to hold court. You know, he started, his voice booming, we really went all out for this trip. I told Vanessa, baby, we are not doing the general admission nonsense. We are not standing in line with the masses. That is for people who do not value their time. We booked the elite VIP tour. He paused for effect. My father nodded appreciatively, as if Kyle had just announced he discovered a cure for the common cold. My mother clasped her hands together, her eyes shining with admiration. $15,000, Kyle dropped the number like it was a mic. For the weekend. But it is worth every penny. We get a private guide. We get front row seats at the Shamu show. We even get to go backstage and pet the killer whales. Can you imagine? Touching an apex predator. That is power. He looked directly at me then. His eyes were cold, calculating. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was rubbing my nose in it. And the dinner, he continued, smirking. We have a private table booked inside the aquarium tunnel. The sharks will be swimming right over our heads while we eat filet mignon prepared by the executive chef. No waiting, no screaming kids, just class, pure class. Vanessa giggled, reaching out to touch his arm. Oh, Kyle, you spoil us. It is going to be like a dream. It is not spoiling, babe. Kyle corrected her, puffing out his chest. It is a lifestyle. It is about the prosperity mindset. You see, Monique, he said, turning his full attention to me, that is your problem. You have a scarcity mindset. You are always worried about saving, about budgets, about coupons. You think small, so you stay small. I gripped my fork so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to tell him that my scarcity mindset was the only reason he had a car to drive to this dinner. I wanted to tell him that his prosperity was funded by my signature. You are poor because you think, poor Kyle lectured, waving his fork in the air. You are worried about a $15 ticket for Jalen. I am worried about creating generational memories. That is the difference between us. That is why we are going VIP, and you are... Well, you are you. You have to spend money to make money, Monique. You have to project success to attract success. Jalen needs to learn that. Maybe if he saw how the other half lives, he would be inspired to do better than delivering papers for pennies. Beatrice nodded vigorously. Amen, Kyle. That is what I always say. You have to manifest your blessings. Monique just doesn't understand how the world works. She likes being a martyr. I looked at Kyle. I looked at his cheap suit that didn't fit quite right in the shoulders. I looked at the watch on his wrist that I knew was a knockoff because I had seen the receipt from Chinatown in his trash. He was lecturing me on wealth. He was lecturing the woman who managed portfolios worth more than his entire bloodline. He was telling me I was poor because I didn't spend money I didn't have on things I didn't need. It was laughable. It was tragic. But mostly, it was infuriating. That sounds amazing, Kyle, I said, my voice dangerously calm. $15,000. That is a lot of money, especially for someone who is between opportunities. Kyle's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Just a blip. Then it was back, brighter and faker than before. Investments, Monique, he said quickly. My investments are paying off big time. Crypto, real estate. You would not understand the complexities. It is high-level stuff. Right, I said. High level. I took a sip of water. The water tasted like tap water, warm and metallic. It tasted like lies. I watched him preen. I watched my family worship at the altar of his delusion. And I knew with absolute certainty that the crash was going to be spectacular. I stared at Kyle's face, flushed with the pride of a man spending someone else's fortune, and for a moment the dining room faded away. The plastic-covered chairs vanished. The smell of pot roast was replaced by the stale air of a bank cubicle 5 years ago. I remembered the day clearly. It was a Tuesday. Kyle was wearing a suit that was 2 sizes too big, looking like a boy playing dress-up. He was sweating. He was desperate. His credit score was 480. He had maxed out every card he had. He had defaulted on a car loan. No bank in the city would touch him. He had come to me begging. He had a vision, he said. He wanted to start a real estate investment firm. He had a lead on a property that was going to flip for double the price. He just needed capital. He needed a line of credit to get started. Monique, you are the only one who can help me, he had whispered, his hands shaking. Vanessa believes in me. Your parents believe in me. But the banks, they just see numbers. They do not see potential. I had looked at the paperwork. It was a business line of credit, $100,000. It required a guarantor. Someone with impeccable credit, someone with assets, someone like me. I knew I shouldn't have done it. My gut screamed no. But then Vanessa had called crying, saying this was their big break. My mother had called saying I needed to support my sister's husband. So I signed. I put my name next to his. I became the safety net. I became the reason he could walk into a room and pretend to be a businessman. I remembered the look on the loan officer's face. He had looked at me, then at Kyle, then back at me. He knew. He knew I was the only thing standing between Kyle and bankruptcy. Now, 5 years later, I was sitting across from the man I had saved, listening to him call me poor. Listening to him lecture me on mindset. He had used that credit line not for real estate but for lifestyle. He had leased cars. He had bought clothes. He had paid for dinners just like this one. He had built a facade of wealth on a foundation of my creditworthiness. And he had never paid it off. He made the minimum payments just enough to keep the wolves at bay, just enough to keep my credit score from tanking. But the principal remained, a $100,000 anchor dragging behind him. I looked at him now, gesturing with his fork, talking about high-level investments. He didn't know that I monitored that account every month. He didn't know that I saw every transaction, every steak dinner, every golf outing, every lie. He thought he was a genius. He thought he had outsmarted the system. He had no idea that the system was sitting right across from him, eating cornbread and plotting his demise. He wasn't investing. He was embezzling. And he was doing it with my permission. Permission that was about to be revoked. I blinked and the bank cubicle disappeared. I was back in my parents' dining room. Kyle was still talking. Vanessa was still gazing at him with adoration. My mother was still nodding in agreement. They were all living in a fantasy world. A world where Kyle was a king and I was a peasant. But kings fall, and peasants revolt. I took a deep breath. The anger that had been hot and sharp was cooling, now hardening into something solid and unbreakable. I looked at Kyle, and I didn't see a brother-in-law anymore. I saw a liability. And as any good accountant knows, liabilities must be liquidated. I set my fork down with a soft clink that echoed in the brief silence after Kyle's speech. I looked him dead in the eye. I kept my face neutral, a mask of polite curiosity. Kyle. That sounds incredibly expensive. I said, my voice soft but clear. $15,000 for a weekend trip. Where did you get that kind of cash right now? I thought the market was volatile. The room went quiet. It was the kind of quiet that happens when someone asks a question everyone is thinking, but no one dares to say. Kyle stiffened, his fork hovered halfway to his mouth. He cleared his throat. Well, Monique, you have to understand leverage. When you operate at my level, cash flow is fluid. It is not about having money in a savings account, earning 0.1% interest like you do. It is about moving capital. It is about liquidity. Liquidity, I repeated, tasting the word. So you have $15,000 in liquid assets right now. Vanessa let out a sharp laugh. It was a cruel sound like glass breaking. Oh, Monique, she said, shaking her head, her earrings jingling. You sound so jealous. Do not worry about our finances. We are doing just fine. Better than fine, actually. We made some smart moves last quarter. Crypto, tech stocks, things that a 9-to-5 worker like you would not understand. You are so focused on your little paycheck, you cannot see the big picture. She reached out and patted my hand, her touch patronizing. It is investment income, honey. Passive income. We make money while we sleep. You should try it sometime instead of slaving away at a desk all day for pennies. I looked at her. I looked at the purse she was so proud of, the one I knew was a knockoff because the stitching was uneven. I looked at the way she looked at me with pity in her eyes. Passive income, I said. Interesting. My father, Deacon James, chimed in. He wiped his mouth with his napkin and nodded solemnly. Your sister is right, Monique. You could learn a lot from Kyle. He has vision. He takes risks. That is how you build wealth. You play it too safe. You are always saving, always worrying. It is not healthy. You need to have faith. God blesses those who step out in faith. Step out in faith. Is that what they called it? Is that what they called using my credit line to fund a luxury vacation while my son counted dollar bills? Do not be envious of your sister's blessings, Monique. My father continued, his voice taking on the cadence of a sermon. Jealousy is a sin. You should be happy for them. You should be asking Kyle for advice, not questioning his pockets. Maybe if you listened to him, you would not have to live in that small apartment. Maybe you could afford to take Jalen somewhere nice for once. The audacity was breathtaking. It was a masterpiece of delusion. They were sitting there eating the food I probably paid for in a roundabout way, telling me I was poor because I didn't steal. They were lecturing me on finance. Me, the woman who audited billionaires for breakfast. I felt a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator who just realized the prey is limping. You are right, Daddy, I said. I should listen more. I should learn about this leverage. Kyle beamed. He puffed out his chest. Anytime, Monique. I am happy to mentor you. Maybe we can sit down after the trip and look at your portfolio. I can probably help you restructure some things. Get you better returns. That would be great, Kyle, I said. I would love to see how you manage your assets. I picked up my water glass and took a sip. The water was still warm, but my blood was ice cold. I had all the confirmation I needed. They didn't have the money. They never had the money. They were spending my money. And they were about to find out what happens when the bank forecloses. I stood up. The chair legs scraped against the floor, a harsh sound in the room filled with the clinking of silverware and self-congratulatory laughter. I looked down at my plate. The roast chicken was untouched. The collard greens were cold. I hadn't taken a single bite. My stomach was churning with a mixture of disgust and adrenaline, a cocktail I had become all too familiar with over the years. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Arguing with them was like trying to explain quantum physics to a goldfish. They lived in a different reality, a reality funded by my silence and my signature. Well, I said, smoothing down my cashmere t-shirt, I should get going. I have a lot of work to do this week. Vanessa looked up from her plate, a piece of chicken suspended on her fork. Already? We haven't even had dessert. Mama made peach cobbler. I'm full, I lied. It looks delicious, though. You all enjoy it. I picked up my purse. It was a simple leather tote, unbranded, understated. Vanessa's eyes flicked to it dismissively. She didn't know the leather was sourced from the same tannery that supplied Hermes. She only saw the lack of a logo. To her, it was just a bag. To me, it was a symbol of everything they missed. I walked to the head of the table where Kyle was still pontificating about crypto. I looked him in the eye. Have a great trip, Kyle, I said. Really? I hope it is everything you imagine. Kyle grinned, food stuck in his teeth. Thanks, Monique. Don't worry, we will take lots of pictures. Maybe next time you can save up and join us, if you work hard enough. Maybe, I said. I turned to my mother. She was watching me with that familiar critical gaze, checking my outfit for flaws one last time. Goodbye, Mama, I said. Love you. Love you too, baby, she said distractedly, already turning back to Vanessa to discuss what outfits she should pack for the VIP dinner. Just try to do better next time, okay? For the family. I walked toward the front door. The air in the house felt thick, heavy with the weight of their expectations and their delusions. I needed to breathe. I needed to get out before I screamed. As I reached for the doorknob, my father's voice stopped me. Monique, wait! Deacon James called out. I turned back. He was wiping his mouth with a napkin, looking at me expectantly. Yes, Daddy. Don't forget to send the allowance this week, he said, his voice casual, as if he were asking for the salt. And send it early if you can. Your mother's blood pressure medication is expensive and my back is acting up again. We need to pick up the prescriptions on Tuesday. I stared at him. He was asking for money. He was sitting at a table full of food, planning a vacation with his other daughter who claimed to be rich, and he was asking me for money for medicine. He didn't ask Kyle. He didn't ask Vanessa. He asked me. The disappointment, the failure, the one with the scarcity mindset. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the manipulation in his eyes. I saw the entitlement. Sure, Daddy, I said, my voice hollow. I will take care of it. Good girl, he said, satisfied. Drive safe. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool evening air. I walked down the steps past the peeling gold lions. I got into my Honda. I didn't cry. I didn't slam the steering wheel. I just sat there for a moment in the dark, listening to the silence. They wanted money for medicine. They wanted me to fund their lives while they spat in my face. I started the car. The engine purred to life. I will take care of it, I whispered to the empty car. Oh, I will definitely take care of it. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I didn't look back at the house. I looked forward, to Monday morning, to my office, to the truth. Monday morning arrived with the cold precision of a balanced ledger. I drove into the underground parking garage of the Sterling Tower, located in the heart of the financial district. I parked my 10-year-old Honda in my reserved spot, right next to a row of gleaming Porsches and Teslas. The valet nodded at me with the kind of deference that is not bought with tips but earned through power. He knew the Honda was a costume. He knew the woman stepping out of it was not a struggling single mother, but a force of nature. I walked through the lobby. The air was cool and smelled of expensive coffee and ambition. I did not stop at the security desk to sign in. I did not wait in line with the analysts and the junior associates. I pulled a black keycard from my purse. It was heavy and sleek. I swiped it at the turnstile and the light flashed green. I walked straight to the elevator bank marked Executive Access. The doors slid open silently. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the 40th floor. My ears popped as the elevator ascended, leaving the noise of the city far below. When the doors opened, I stepped onto plush carpet that cost more per square yard than my parents' living room set. The reception area was quiet. The receptionist, a young man named David, looked up and smiled. Good morning, Ms. Williams, he said. Your coffee is on your desk, and the boardroom is prepped for the 10 o'clock. Thank you, David, I said, not breaking stride. Cancel the 10 o'clock. Clear my schedule for the morning. I have a personal audit to conduct. I walked down the hallway past the glass-walled offices of the junior partners. I reached the end of the hall. The corner office. The door was heavy frosted glass. Etched into the surface in elegant silver letters was my name. Monique Williams, senior partner. My family thought I filed papers. They thought I answered phones and fetched dry cleaning for important men in suits. They had no idea that I was the important person in the suit. They had no idea that companies paid me thousands of dollars an hour to find the money their executives tried to steal. I was a forensic accountant. I was a bloodhound with a calculator. I pushed the door open. The office was flooded with light. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the skyline. But I did not look at the view. I looked at my desk. It was a command center. I sat down in my leather chair. It molded to my back perfectly. I pressed a single button, and my workstation roared to life. Three 30-inch high-definition monitors illuminated the room. They glowed with the blue light of potential. I cracked my knuckles. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. I was not Monique the sister. I was not Monique the daughter who could not do anything right. I was the auditor. And I was about to open a case file on the people who shared my DNA. I logged into the secure server. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I pulled up the banking interface. It was time to see exactly how much my silence had cost me. It was time to see the truth hidden in the numbers. I took a sip of the coffee David had left for me. It was hot and bitter, just the way I liked it. Let us see what you have been hiding, Kyle, I whispered to the screens. The hunt was on. The interface for the private banking portal was not flashy. It was stark utilitarian and designed for people who understood that real money did not need graphics. It needed security. I typed in my username. It was not Monique Williams. It was a string of alphanumeric characters known only to me and the bank's mainframe. I entered my password. It was 20 characters long, a chaotic jumble of symbols that I had memorized like a prayer. The system prompted me for a two-factor authentication code. I pulled my phone from my purse and waited for the text. 6 digits. The keys to the kingdom. I typed them in. Access granted. The screen refreshed. A dashboard appeared filled with accounts balances and transaction histories. These were not my personal accounts. These were the liabilities. These were the debts I had underwritten, the loans I had secured, the financial mistakes I had cleaned up for years. I navigated to the section labeled Third-Party Liabilities. There it was. The business line of credit for Kyle's real estate venture. Venture was a generous word. It implied activity. It implied risk and reward. What I saw on the screen was not a venture. It was a parasite. I clicked on the account number. The transaction history expanded, a long list of dates, merchants, and amounts. I scrolled down, my eyes scanning the data with the detached precision of a surgeon looking for a tumor. I expected to see charges for lumber contractors' permits. I expected to see the mundane expenses of flipping houses. That was the story Kyle had sold me 5 years ago. That was the dream I had invested in. Instead, I saw a lifestyle. Target, Best Buy, the Apple Store, a recurring subscription to a premium golf channel, charges for gas at stations nowhere near any construction site. My heart rate remained steady. This was not surprising. It was disappointing, yes, but predictable. Kyle was a small man with big appetites. Then I saw the recent activity. The transactions from the last 48 hours. The numbers jumped out at me, bold and undeniable. $15,000. One transaction. The merchant name was not a supplier. It was not a title company. It was SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment, VIP concierge services. I stared at the line item. I blinked, half expecting it to change, to resolve into something justifiable. But the pixels did not move. $15,000. He had charged the entire trip to the business card, the card I had co-signed, the card that was supposed to be for emergency capital and operational expenses. He had stood in my parents' dining room, puffed out his chest, and bragged about his prosperity mindset. He had lectured me about liquidity and leverage, and the whole time he was paying for his ego trip with my credit line. He wasn't investing. He was stealing. He was using my name, my reputation, my financial stability to treat my sister and her children to a luxury vacation while telling my son he wasn't good enough to come along. He was laughing at me while picking my pocket. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It wasn't anger anymore. Anger is hot. Anger is messy. This was clarity. This was the moment the fog lifted, and I saw the landscape for what it truly was. I wasn't a family member to them. I was a resource, a line item on their budget, a silent partner in their delusion. I clicked on the transaction details. The timestamp was Friday 4 p.m., just hours before he sent that text message. Just hours before he decided Jalen was too rough for his elite experience. He had booked the trip on my dime and then excluded my son from enjoying it. The audacity was almost impressive. It was a level of narcissism so pure it should be studied in a lab. I took a deep breath. The air in my office felt thin, sharp. I looked at the screen. I looked at the name on the account, Kyle Johnson, and right below it, in smaller font, Guarantor Monique Williams. He thought that name was his shield. He thought it was his golden ticket. He didn't realize it was actually the sword hanging over his head. And the thread was about to snap. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred into a single line of green text against the black background. Transaction ID 492 Alpha. Merchant SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment. Amount $15,000. The date stamp was Friday at 4:45 in the afternoon. The timestamp was important. It was exactly 3 hours before Kyle sent the text message telling me my son did not fit in. It was 3 hours before he decided that Jalen was too rough around the edges to be seen with his children. He had booked the trip first. He had secured the luxury. He had locked in the private dining and the backstage passes, and he had done it all using the business line of credit that I guaranteed. He had charged the exclusion of my son to my own account. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat, but it was a dry, humorless sound. It was the laugh of someone who realizes the joke is on them, but they are the only one who understands the punchline. Kyle had stood in my parents' dining room and lectured me about the prosperity mindset. He had told me I was poor because I thought small. He had bragged about his liquidity. Now I saw his liquidity. It was my credit score. He was not a real estate mogul. He was a parasite. He was siphoning off the equity of my reputation to fund a lifestyle he could not earn. I scrolled down the list of transactions. It did not stop at SeaWorld. There was a charge from last week, $4,000 at a luxury boutique in Phipps Plaza. The merchant code was for leather goods. Chanel. I remembered Vanessa posting a photo of a new bag on Instagram last Tuesday. Caption: hubby spoiled me today. Blessed. She was wearing a bag bought with credit I secured for lumber and drywall. There was another charge. $2,000 at a watch dealer in the Diamond District. Rolex. That was the watch on his wrist, the one he flashed while cutting his steak. He bought a counterfeit watch with a business loan to impress people who did not care about him. He was building a monument to his own ego, and he was using my financial foundation to do it. I leaned back in my chair. The leather creaked. The office was silent, but inside my head it was a courtroom. This was not just bad manners. This was not just family drama. This was misappropriation of funds. This was fraud. He had signed a contract stating that this line of credit was solely for business expenses related to property acquisition and renovation. A VIP tour to SeaWorld was not renovation. A Chanel bag was not acquisition. He had broken the contract. He had broken the law. And he had done it with a smile on his face, thinking I was too stupid or too passive to check. He thought I was just Monique, the sister who filed papers. He forgot that I was Monique, the partner who tracked down millions in hidden assets for a living. He had handed me the weapon I needed to destroy him. I looked at the transaction again. $15,000. That money could have funded Jalen's college fund. It could have bought him a car when he turned 16. It could have been invested in a legitimate asset. Instead, it was going to be used to pet a whale while my son sat at home. No, I whispered to the screen. Not today, not ever again. I took a screenshot. I saved it to a secure folder labeled Evidence. Then I opened the next tab. I needed to see how deep the rot went. I needed to check the account I had set up for my parents. If Kyle was eating from my plate, I had a sinking feeling my parents were picking at the crumbs. I closed the tab with Kyle's fraudulent vacation spending. My hand was steady, but my stomach was churning. It was one thing for my brother-in-law to be a thief. I always knew he was a grifter. It was expected. But the next tab was the one I was dreading. It was the account labeled Emergency Medical Fund. I had set this account up 3 years ago after my father had a scare with his heart. I put $2,000 into it every single month automatically. It was their safety net. It was for copays. It was for prescriptions. It was for the day when age finally caught up with them and they needed care that Medicare did not cover. I had given my mother access to it for emergencies only. I trusted her. She was my mother. She was the woman who quoted scripture and wore hats to church. I clicked the tab. The balance should have been over $70,000 by now. It wasn't. The number on the screen was $52,000. I blinked. $20,000 was missing. I scrolled down to the transaction history. My eyes scanned for a hospital bill, a surgery center, maybe a specialist my father had not told me about. There was a withdrawal dated last Friday, a wire transfer, $20,000. I clicked on the transaction to see the details. My mother was old school. She liked to leave notes in the memo field for her own records. She treated online banking like a checkbook register. The memo line stared back at me in bold Arial font. Transfer to Vanessa Beachwear and Spa Shopping. I stopped breathing. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Beachwear. My father had stood in his driveway last night and asked me for money for medicine. He had looked me in the eye and told me his back was acting up. He had guilted me about blood pressure pills. And 3 days before that, they had drained $20,000 from their own medical fund to buy my sister bikinis and massages. They were not just favoring her, they were looting their own survival to fund her vanity. I pictured Vanessa prancing around the resort in a designer swimsuit paid for with the money meant to keep our parents alive. I pictured my mother signing the transfer, convinced that Vanessa deserved it, convinced that Vanessa's happiness was worth risking their health. And then they turned around and asked me for more. They asked the daughter they excluded. They asked the daughter whose son was not good enough. They did not see me as a daughter. They saw me as an endless renewable resource. They thought I was a fountain that would never run dry no matter how much they took or how badly they treated me. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was hot and angry. I wiped it away furiously. That was the last tear I would shed for them. They wanted to play with fire. They wanted to burn through cash like it was paper. Fine. I was not just going to cut them off. I was going to let them feel the heat. I minimized the window. The grief was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard calculation of a forensic auditor who had just found the smoking gun. They took the money. Now they were going to pay the price. I stared at the transaction history until the words burned into my retina. $20,000. Gone. Evaporated into the ether of luxury retail and spa treatments. The money I had meticulously saved for their old age, for the inevitable decline, for the safety net they would desperately need, was now funding a shopping spree for the daughter who had never saved a dime in her life. My anger shifted. It wasn't the hot, explosive rage that makes you scream. It was something deeper, something quieter. It was the temperature of deep space. Absolute zero. It was the kind of fury that sharpens your focus and slows your heartbeat. I realized then that my father didn't need medicine. His back wasn't acting up because of age. It was acting up because he was carrying the weight of his own lies. He had looked me in the eye and begged for money for pills, knowing full well that they had just blown 20 grand on bikinis. They weren't just irresponsible, they were predators. And I was the prey. I was the golden goose they kept in the basement, plucking feathers whenever they needed to look good for the neighbors. They didn't love me, they loved my utility. They loved that I was reliable, that I was guilt-ridden, that I was always there to clean up the mess. Well, the maid was quitting. I picked up my office phone. I didn't tremble. My hand was steady as a rock. I dialed my executive assistant's extension. David picked up on the first ring. "Yes, Ms. Williams. Cancel everything." "David," I said, my voice flat and monotone. "The merger meeting, the audit review, the lunch with the partners. Clear the calendar for the rest of the week." There was a pause on the line. "Is everything all right, Ms. Williams? Is there a family emergency?" "Yes, David," I said, staring at the screen where the theft was laid out in black and white. "There is a family emergency. I have a personal case I need to handle. A liquidation event." I understood. "I'll clear the schedule. Do you need me to book travel?" "Not yet, David. But keep the helicopter service on standby. I might need a lift to Orlando." I hung up. I looked around my office. It was a fortress of solitude and success. I had built this. I had earned every inch of this view, and I had let them make me feel small. I had let them treat me like an ATM with a pulse. No more. I wasn't just going to cut them off. I was going to surgically remove them from my financial life. I was going to extract every penny of leverage they had over me. I was going to audit their entire existence. I opened a new document on my computer. I typed a header in bold letters. Operation Liquidation. Step 1, Legal Counsel. Step 2, Asset Freeze. Step 3, the Confrontation. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to execute. I picked up my cell phone. I scrolled to the contact for Mr. Sterling, my personal attorney. He was a shark in a three-piece suit, the kind of lawyer who made grown men weep in depositions. It was time to unleash the shark. I dialed Mr. Sterling's private number. He answered on the second ring, his voice smooth and dangerous like a loaded gun wrapped in velvet. "Monique," he said. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "It is not often you call me on a Monday morning. Usually you handle the bodies yourself. I need you to draft a document, Sterling," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "A notice of immediate guarantor withdrawal. Effective immediately." There was a pause on the line. I could hear the rustle of papers in the background. "Who is the target?" Sterling asked, his tone sharpening. "Kyle Johnson," I said. "My brother-in-law. The business line of credit for his real estate LLC. The one I co-signed 5 years ago." Sterling whistled low and impressed. "That is a big trigger to pull, Monique. You know what that does to his credit? It nukes it. It is a financial death sentence." "Are you sure you want to go nuclear?" "I am sure," I said. "I want you to cite breach of contract, specifically misuse of funds. I have the transaction records. He is using capital for personal luxury expenses, vacations, designer goods. It is embezzlement, Sterling. Plain and simple." I heard the smile in his voice before I saw it. "I love it when you talk like that. Sending the draft over now? Do you want me to file it with the bank immediately?" "Not yet," I said. "I want it loaded in the chamber. I want it ready to fire. But I do not want to pull the trigger until Saturday." "Saturday?" Sterling asked. "Why Saturday?" "Because that is when they check in," I said. "That is when they walk up to the front desk of the hotel thinking they are royalty. That is when they hand over the credit card. I want the card to decline the moment it touches the reader. I want them to be standing in the lobby, surrounded by their high-class friends when the floor drops out from under them." You are cold. Monique Sterling laughed. Remind me never to cross you. Just draft the letter Sterling. And make sure it is airtight. I want the acceleration clause highlighted. I want him to know that the moment that card declines, the full balance is due. All of it. Consider it done, Sterling said. Anything else? Yes, I said. Prepare a second document, a demand letter for the $20,000 my parents stole from the medical fund. I want that ready to go too. If they want to play games, I'm going to clear the board. Understood. I will have everything in your inbox within the hour. Happy hunting, Monique. I hung up the phone. I looked at the calendar on my desk. 5 days. 5 days until Saturday. 5 days to let them think they had won. 5 days to let them dig their hole a little deeper. I felt a thrill of anticipation. It was not joy. It was the satisfaction of a trap well set. They thought they were going on a vacation. They had no idea they were walking into an ambush. I opened my email client. The draft from Sterling was sitting in my inbox, gleaming like a polished dagger. Notice of immediate guarantor withdrawal. The language was perfect, legal cold, and absolutely devastating. It cited the misuse of funds clause. It referenced the unauthorized transactions. It triggered the acceleration clause, which meant the entire $100,000 balance was due immediately upon receipt. I saved the document as a PDF. Then I logged back into the banking portal. I navigated to the notification settings for the business line of credit. I found the option for account suspension. Usually you would click suspend immediately. But I did not want immediate. Immediate was too kind. Immediate would give them time to scramble. Immediate would let them make excuses and find another way to pay before they even left the house. I wanted them to feel safe. I wanted them to pack their bags. I wanted them to drive to the airport, secure in the knowledge that they were better than me. I wanted them to walk into that hotel lobby smelling of expensive perfume and entitlement. I wanted the fall to be from the highest possible height. I opened the scheduled tasks menu. I created a new task. Action suspend credit line. Reason fraudulent activity. Guarantor withdrawal. Scheduled date Saturday, May 20th. Scheduled time 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 12 o'clock. Check-in time. At exactly noon, Kyle would be standing at the front desk. He would be handing over the card with a flourish. He would be smiling at the receptionist, expecting her to be impressed by his status. And at exactly noon, the system would execute my command. The card would die, the account would lock, the red flags would go up, and the email from Sterling would hit the bank's legal department at the same second. It was perfect. It was a synchronized demolition. I clicked confirm. The screen flashed green. Task scheduled. I leaned back in my chair and watched the cursor blink. I felt a strange sense of calm. It was the calm of a sniper who has already pulled the trigger and is just waiting for the bullet to land. They wanted a VIP experience. They wanted to feel special. Well, I was going to give them a customized experience they would never forget. I was not just cutting them off. I was letting them walk the plank. And I was going to be there to watch them splash. Now for the second part of the plan, the upgrade. If they were going to be humiliated, I needed to be elevated. I needed to show them not just what they had lost, but what they could never have. I picked up my phone again. It was time to call in a favor. A big one. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Mr. Zhao. He was a billionaire tech mogul. I had saved him $50 million in a divorce settlement last year by finding offshore accounts his ex-wife had hidden. He owed me. And he liked to pay his debts. I pressed call. It was time to show my son what real power looked like. I scrolled through my contact list until I found the entry. Zhao Private. I hesitated for a split second. Calling in a favor from a man like Mr. Zhao was not something you did lightly. He operated in a stratosphere of wealth where favors were currency and the exchange rate was steep. But then I thought of Jalen's face when he put his money away. I thought of Kyle's smug grin. I pressed call. The phone rang once. Then a voice answered smooth and cultured with just a hint of a Mandarin accent. Ms. Williams. To what do I owe the pleasure? I hope you have not found another $50 million missing from my accounts. Mr. Zhao, I said, leaning back in my chair. No missing money today. Just a personal request. I need to access something that is not on the menu. I could hear the smile in his voice. You know I enjoy the impossible, Monique. What do you need? I need a private buyout at SeaWorld Orlando, I said. Not the VIP tour, not the skip the line pass. I want the park. Or at least a significant portion of it. I want the presidential villa inside the park. I want the underwater dining room reserved for a private party of 2, and I want it for this weekend. There was a pause. SeaWorld. That is, unexpected. Usually my clients ask for islands in the Caribbean or tables at impossible restaurants in Paris. You want to see Shamu. My son wants to see Shamu, I corrected. And I want to show my family what real access looks like. They think they are VIPs, Mr. Zhao. I want to show them they are just tourists. Ah, revenge, Zhao chuckled. A dish best served with exclusivity. I like it. The private buyout package is usually reserved for Saudi princes and tech founders who want to rent the park for their children's birthdays. It costs $73,000 for 48 hours. Are you prepared for that? I have the liquidity, I said, using Kyle's favorite word against him. Can you make the call? Consider it done, Zhao said. I am friends with the chairman of the board. I will have his personal assistant contact you within the hour to finalize the details. Do you need anything else? Transportation, perhaps? A car from the airport would be nice, I said. Something understated but undeniable. I will send the Maybach, Zhao said. Enjoy your trip, Monique, and give my regards to your family. I have a feeling they are going to need them. Thank you, Mr. Zhao. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. $73,000. It was an obscene amount of money. It was more than my parents' house was worth. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the message. I looked at the clock. It was time to go home. It was time to tell Jalen to pack his bags. We weren't just going to Orlando. We were going to war. And we were going to arrive in style. I left the office at 3 in the afternoon. I walked out of the building with a spring in my step that hadn't been there in years. I drove home singing along to the radio. I wasn't just a mother anymore, I was a fairy godmother with a platinum card. When I unlocked the door to our apartment, Jalen was sitting at the kitchen table doing his homework. He looked up surprised to see me home so early. Mom, is everything okay? He asked, pushing his glasses up his nose. Did you get fired? I laughed. It was a genuine happy sound. No, baby, I didn't get fired. I got promoted, in a manner of speaking. I walked over to him and closed his textbook. Go pack your bags, I said. We are going on a trip. Jalen's face fell. He looked down at the table. To the public pool, he whispered. I lifted his chin so he had to look at me. No, Jalen. Not to the public pool. We are going to Orlando. His eyes widened. But Aunt Vanessa said... Forget what Aunt Vanessa said, I interrupted. Aunt Vanessa doesn't know what she is talking about. We are going to SeaWorld, and we are not just going to visit. We are going to own the place. But, how he asked, his voice filled with confusion and hope. The tickets are expensive. And Kyle said, Kyle is a liar, I said firmly. And I have been saving for a special occasion. This is it. I want you to pack your nicest clothes. Not your play clothes, your Sunday best. Why, he asked. Because we are going to have dinner with Shamu, I said, and you need to look sharp for a whale. He stared at me for a second, trying to process the information. Then a slow grin spread across his face. Really? He asked. Really, I promised. Now go. We have a plane to catch. He jumped up from the table, his chair clattering to the floor. He ran to his room, shouting with joy. I listened to him throwing clothes into his suitcase, humming to himself. It was the best sound in the world. I walked into my own bedroom and pulled out my suitcase. I didn't pack my usual practical clothes. I packed the silk dresses I had bought in Paris. I packed the heels I never wore because they were too fancy for the office. I packed the diamond earrings I had bought myself for my 30th birthday. I wasn't going to look like the poor relation. I was going to look like the woman who signed the checks. I was going to look like the boss. And when my family saw me, they were going to know that they had made a very, very big mistake. We skipped the outlet malls. We drove past the department stores with their sale signs and their fluorescent lighting. I took Jalen to the Oak Street district, where the sidewalks are heated in the winter, and the security guards wear suits that cost more than my car. Vanessa and Kyle thought wealth was about volume. They thought it was about how big the logo was on your chest. If you could not read the brand from across the street, they did not want it. That is the philosophy of the broke and the insecure. I wanted to teach Jalen the philosophy of the truly powerful. Quiet luxury. We walked into a boutique that had no name on the door, just a small brass number. Inside it smelled of cedar and old leather. There were no racks of clothes. There were just bolts of fabric and a man named Giuseppe, who looked like he had been tailoring suits since the Renaissance. He did not look at Jalen's worn-out sneakers with judgment. He looked at him with potential. Madam Williams, Giuseppe said, bowing slightly. Is this the young gentleman? This is Jalen, I said, placing a hand on my son's shoulder. He has a dinner date with a whale. He needs to look the part. Jalen looked nervous. He was used to clothes from the clearance bin. He was used to shirts that were too big, so he could grow into them. He stood stiffly as Giuseppe measured his shoulders, his arms, his inseam. Relax, young man, Giuseppe said, his voice kind. The fabric must flow with you. It must be a second skin. He brought out the fabric. It was not stiff polyester. It was Italian linen in a soft cream color. It was breathable and light, perfect for the Florida heat. It was the kind of fabric that whispered money rather than shouted it. I watched as Jalen put on the sample jacket. It was just a fitting shell, but already the transformation was happening. He stood a little straighter. He pushed his glasses up his nose, not with nervousness, but with precision. We are not doing a tie, I told Giuseppe. Open collar, relaxed. He is a child on vacation, not a lawyer in court. And for the feet, Giuseppe asked. I pointed to a pair of loafers on the shelf. Hand-stitched leather, soft as butter, no logo, no gold buckle, just craftsmanship. Jalen slid his feet into them. He walked a few steps on the plush carpet. He stopped in front of the three-way mirror. He stared at himself. For the first time in his life, he did not look like the poor cousin. He did not look like the charity case. He looked like a young heir. He looked like he belonged on a yacht in Monaco. Mom, he whispered, touching the lapel of the jacket. I look expensive. I walked up behind him and met his eyes in the mirror. No, baby, I corrected him. You look valuable. There is a difference. Expensive is what you pay. Valuable is what you are. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. He smiled. It was a genuine, confident smile. The kind of smile Kyle tried to buy but never could. Wrap it up, Giuseppe, I said, handing over my card. We will take two. And rush the tailoring. We leave in 24 hours. As we walked out of the store into the sunlight, Jalen did not look down at his feet. He looked straight ahead. The armor was on, the war had begun, and my little soldier was ready for battle. I looked at my phone while the town car glided silently toward a secluded entrance of the airport. A notification from Facebook popped up on my screen. It was Vanessa. She had checked in at gate D42. The caption read, "Jet setting with the fam. VIP life starts now." Attached was a photo of them crowded into the plastic seats of the waiting area. Kyle was wearing a bright neon tracksuit with a giant designer logo across the chest that I knew for a fact was a fake. My mother was fanning herself with a boarding pass. In the background you could see the chaos of the general terminal. People sleeping on the floor, crying babies, the crushing reality of economy travel during peak season. I scrolled down, Vanessa had posted a follow-up comment. Flight delayed 2 hours. Ugh, the price of being elite, I guess. I turned off my screen. We were not at gate D42. We were not at the main terminal at all. The driver pulled up to a nondescript gate far away from the madness. A security guard in a dark suit checked our license plate and waved us through. We were at the private suite. This is how billionaires travel. This is how celebrities travel. You do not wait in line. You do not take off your shoes. You do not smell the stress of thousands of other travelers. We walked into a private lounge that looked more like a living room in a five-star hotel. There was a bowl of fresh fruit. There were snacks arranged like art. A concierge named Sarah took our passports and smiled. Relax, Ms. Williams, she said. I will handle the screening and the luggage. The car will take you to the tarmac when the plane is ready. Jalen sat down on a velvet sofa. He looked around nervously as if he expected someone to come in and tell us we were in the wrong place. Mom, he whispered, are we allowed to eat the snacks? Eat whatever you want, baby, I said. It is all included. He took a bottle of sparkling water. He held it like it was fragile. He was so used to being told no. He was so used to being told that things were too expensive or not for him. Watching him realize that the world could be soft was the best return on investment I had ever seen. When it was time to board, we did not walk down a jet bridge. A BMW 7 Series drove us directly across the tarmac to the side of the plane. We walked up the stairs and turned left, into the first-class cabin. The seats were not seats. They were pods. They were leather cocoons of privacy and comfort. Jalen's eyes were wide as saucers. He sat down and pressed a button, and the seat reclined into a bed. A flight attendant appeared instantly. She was holding a silver tray. Mr. Williams, she said, addressing my 12-year-old son. Would you like a beverage before takeoff? Freshly squeezed orange juice, perhaps? Yes, please, Jalen squeaked. She poured the bright orange liquid. Not into a plastic cup, not into a paper cup that leaked. She poured it into a heavy crystal glass that caught the light from the window. She placed it on the white linen tablecloth in front of him. Jalen stared at the glass. He reached out and touched it tentatively. Mom, he said, looking at me, it is real glass. What if I break it? You won't break it, I said, fastening my seatbelt. And even if you do, it does not matter. Drink up. He lifted the glass. He took a sip. He closed his eyes and smiled. It tastes better, he said. I looked at the Facebook app one last time. Vanessa was complaining about the lack of legroom. Yes, I thought. It certainly does. The Florida heat hit the tarmac like a physical weight. It was a thick, humid blanket that instantly made your clothes stick to your skin and turned perfectly styled hair into a frizzy mess. I took a deep breath of the heavy air and smiled. I knew exactly what was happening on the other side of the airport terminal. I could picture it with the clarity of a high-definition security feed. Vanessa and the family were currently navigating the hellscape of baggage claim. They would be fighting for space at the carousel, dragging their heavy, overpacked suitcases off the belt. Then they would haul that luggage out to the curb to wait for the complimentary resort shuttle. They called it a luxury transfer in the brochure. I knew the reality. It was a bus. A large, crowded bus, with vinyl seats that smelled of stale popcorn and sunscreen. They would be standing in the heat, swatting away mosquitoes, waiting for the driver to load their bags. Kyle would be sweating through his polyester tracksuit, barking orders at the kids. Vanessa would be trying to take a selfie that cropped out the 50 other exhausted tourists crammed in behind her. They were starting their elite vacation in a cattle car. We did not go to baggage claim. We did not go to the curb. As we reached the bottom of the airplane stairs, a vehicle was waiting for us directly on the tarmac. It was not a bus. It was a stretch limousine, so black and so polished it looked like a pool of oil that had solidified into a car. It gleamed under the harsh Florida sun, a monolith of silence and privacy. The driver was standing next to the rear door. He was a mountain of a man wearing a black suit that defied the heat, and on his hands he wore white gloves. Pristine, blindingly white cotton gloves. He did not just open the door. He performed a ceremony. He bowed slightly as we approached. "Welcome to Orlando, Mr. Williams," he said, addressing Jalen first. Jalen stopped in his tracks. He looked at the car, then at the driver, then at me. His mouth hung open slightly. "Is this for us?" he whispered. "Is this a mistake, Mom?" I put my hand on his back and guided him forward. "No mistake, baby. This is how we travel now." We slid into the back. The interior was a sanctuary. The air conditioning was set to a crisp 68 degrees. The seats were soft leather that smelled like success. The windows were tinted so dark that the outside world ceased to exist. The driver closed the door and the noise of the airport vanished instantly. It was replaced by the soft hum of the engine and the sound of jazz playing quietly over the surround sound system. There was a bottle of chilled sparkling cider waiting in an ice bucket. I poured a glass for Jalen. He took a sip and looked out the window. Through the tint, he could see the other planes, the baggage carts, the heat waves radiating off the asphalt. But he could not feel any of it. He was safe inside the bubble I had bought for him. I leaned back and closed my eyes. I imagined Kyle sitting on that bus, his knees pressed against the seat in front of him, realizing that the air conditioning was broken. I took a sip of my drink. It tasted like victory. "To the good life, Jalen," I said, clinking my glass against his. "To the good life, Mom," he replied. The car began to move, gliding forward like a shark through water. We were heading to the ocean, and the sharks were waiting. We did not pull up to the main hotel lobby. We did not wait in the valet line behind the minivans and the rented convertibles. The limousine took a sharp left turn down an unmarked service road lined with dense bamboo and tropical palms. We passed a security checkpoint that looked more like the entrance to a military base than a theme park. The guard did not just check a pass, he scanned the vehicle and verified our identities against a digital list. This was the entrance for the owners, the entrance for the people who did not just visit the park, but who commanded it. The car stopped in front of a low-profile structure, hidden behind a man-made waterfall. It was a villa designed to disappear into the landscape, a masterpiece of stone and glass that felt ancient and modern at the same time. There was no front desk, there was no check-in counter. A butler named Arthur was waiting at the carved wooden doors, with cold towels and a key that looked like a piece of coral. "Welcome home, Ms. Williams," Arthur said. "Your luggage has already been unpacked. Dinner will be served whenever you are ready." We walked inside. The air was cool and smelled of sea salt and orchids. The living room was vast with white furniture that looked like clouds. But I did not stop to admire the art or the architecture. I walked straight to the double doors at the end of the hallway. "Close your eyes, Jalen," I said. He obeyed. I pushed the doors open. "Open them." The room was not lit by lamps. It was bathed in a surreal, shifting blue light that rippled across the floor and danced on the ceiling. It felt like we were underwater. Jalen opened his eyes. He dropped his backpack. It hit the floor with a soft thud. He walked forward slowly as if he were in a trance. The far wall of the bedroom was not a wall. It was a single massive pane of reinforced acrylic glass that stretched from floor to ceiling and wall to wall. On the other side was millions of gallons of crystal-clear water. As Jalen approached the glass, a shadow moved in the deep blue. A massive shape glided past, silent and majestic. It was a dolphin. Then another. They swirled around each other, their sleek gray bodies illuminated by the sunlight filtering down from the surface far above. One of the dolphins paused. It hovered right in front of the glass, its dark, intelligent eye looking directly into the room. It seemed to be studying the boy in the linen suit. Jalen pressed his hand against the cold glass. The dolphin nudged the other side as if high-fiving him. "Mom." Jalen whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and pure wonder. "The dolphins. They are right here." "They are right here, baby," I said, standing behind him and wrapping my arms around his shoulders. Are they going to watch me sleep?" he asked, turning to look at me, his eyes wide. "They are going to sing you to sleep," I said. "You are part of their pod now." I thought about Vanessa. I thought about the room she was probably fighting for right now. The one with the view of the parking lot or the air conditioning unit. The one she thought was the height of luxury. She was staying at a hotel. My son was sleeping in the ocean. He turned back to the glass, watching the creatures dance in the blue void. The light reflected in his glasses, making him look like he had stars in his eyes. "This is better than a book," he whispered. Yes, I thought. It certainly is. And the best chapter hasn't even started yet. The sun was high over Orlando, filtering through the swaying palm trees and casting dappled shadows on the private terrace of our villa. The air was filled with the sound of water gently lapping against the stones of our private lagoon. But inside the villa, it was quiet. It was the heavy, expectant silence of a courtroom just before the verdict is read. I looked at the slim gold watch on my wrist. The second hand swept around the face with a smooth, relentless rhythm. It was 11 o'clock in the morning. 1 hour. There were exactly 60 minutes left until noon, 60 minutes until the trap I had set 5 days ago snapped shut. 60 minutes until the facade of wealth my family had built on my back came crumbling down. I walked over to the wet bar and poured myself a glass of chilled white wine. It was a crisp Sancerre mineral and sharp. I did not usually drink before noon, but today was a special occasion. Today was a funeral for their ego, and I wanted to be ready to pour one out. I took the glass and walked to the patio doors. Through the glass, I could see Jalen swimming in our private pool. He was laughing, splashing water at a floating toy, completely unburdened by the weight of being the poor relation. He was free. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It buzzed again. And again. It was a frantic vibration that demanded attention. I walked over and picked it up. The screen was lit up with notifications from the Family First group chat. I unlocked the phone and the messages flooded in. Vanessa had sent a barrage of photos. The first one was a selfie of her and Kyle standing in front of the main hotel entrance. They were wearing matching sunglasses. The caption read, "We have arrived. Elite status only. #blessed. #vacation mode." The next photo was of the hotel lobby, which was crowded with tourists. Vanessa had captioned it, "The line is long, but when you are VIP, you do not mind waiting with the commoners." Then came the dig, the inevitable poke at the bear. Vanessa wrote, "Wish Monique could have made it. But honestly, this place is a little too upscale for her taste. She would probably feel uncomfortable with all this luxury. Better she stayed home." My mother, Beatrice, replied immediately, "You are right, honey. God puts us where we belong. Enjoy your blessings. You earned this." I stared at the words. You earned this. They truly believed it. They believed they deserved this trip. They believed they were the chosen ones. They had erased the reality that the card in Kyle's pocket had my name attached to the credit history. They had erased the fact that the money for Vanessa's new swimsuit came from their own medical fund. They were high on the fumes of their own delusion. I looked at the time on the phone. 11:15. They were in line. They were inching closer to the front desk. They were getting their IDs ready. They were rehearsing their requests for an upgrade. I took a slow, deliberate sip of wine. The liquid was cold, but it warmed my chest. I could almost see them. Kyle puffing out his chest, Vanessa checking her makeup in her compact. My parents looking around hoping someone would recognize them as important. They were walking toward a cliff, and they were dancing as they went. I did not type a reply. I did not send an angry emoji. I did not warn them. I just watched the time change from 11:15 to 11:16. "Keep talking," I whispered to the screen, my voice barely audible over the sound of the waterfall. "Keep bragging. Take all the pictures you want. Because in 44 minutes, the only thing you are going to be posting is a plea for bail money. Just you wait." At exactly 12 o'clock, the automatic doors of the SeaWorld resort lobby slid open and the circus arrived. My family did not enter a room, they invaded it. There were 10 of them in total, including my parents, Vanessa, Kyle, and their herd of unruly children. They were a hurricane of noise and entitlement, that instantly sucked the oxygen out of the elegant space. The children were screaming, running between the velvet ropes and knocking over a display of brochures. Vanessa was barking orders at a bellboy, snapping her fingers as if he were a servant from a bygone era. My mother Beatrice stood by the fountain fanning herself and complaining loudly about the humidity, waiting for someone to recognize her non-existent status. Kyle marched to the front desk like a general conquering a new territory. He did not wait for the receptionist to finish with the elderly couple. He cut right in front of them. He was sweating, his face slick with the heat and the exertion of pretending to be important. He slammed his hand on the marble countertop. "Check in," he announced, his voice booming across the lobby. "Johnson party, presidential suite, and make it quick. We have been traveling with commoners all morning and I need a drink." The receptionist was a young woman with impeccable posture and a name tag that read Sarah. She blinked, looking from Kyle to the chaotic scene behind him. She forced a polite smile, the kind that barely covers the exhaustion of dealing with tourists. "Welcome to the resort, sir," she said, her voice cool and professional. "Do you have a reservation number?" Kyle laughed, a short, arrogant bark. "I do not need a number. I am a Diamond Elite member. Just look up the name, Kyle Johnson. Or better yet, look up the business, Johnson Global Enterprises." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the card, the heavy metal black card, the one that was supposed to be for construction materials, the one that was tied directly to my credit score and my financial reputation. He held it up so the light caught the chip. He wanted everyone in line to see it. He wanted them to know he was the man with the black card. "Charge everything to this," he said, tossing it onto the counter with a metallic clatter. "The room deposit, the resort fees, and upgrade us to the platinum dining plan. We are not here to budget." Sarah picked up the card. She typed something into her terminal. She slid the card through the reader. For a second, there was silence. The kind of silence that precedes a thunderclap. Then came the sound. A harsh, dissonant electronic buzz that cut through the lobby chatter like a knife. It was the sound of rejection. On the screen facing Sarah, a large box flashed. It was not green. It was an angry, pulsing red. The letters were bold and impossible to miss. "Declined. Code 404. Fraud alert. Report to security." Sarah's smile vanished instantly. Her eyes narrowed. She looked at the screen, then at the card, then up at Kyle. The warmth was gone from her face, replaced by the icy scrutiny of a gatekeeper who realizes someone is trying to climb the fence. "I am sorry, sir," she said, her voice loud enough for the people in line to hear. "This card has been declined. The system is flagging it as stolen or compromised." Kyle's face turned a shade of purple that clashed with his neon tracksuit. "What are you talking about?" he sputtered. "That is impossible. That is a black card. Run it again. Your machine is broken." "I cannot run it again, sir," Sarah said, pulling the card off the counter and holding it out of his reach. "The instruction is to confiscate the card and contact the issuer." "Confiscate!" Kyle screamed, slamming his fist on the desk. "Give me back my card." "Do you know who I am?" "I know that your payment method has been terminated," Sarah said, reaching for the phone on her desk. "Security to the front desk, please. We have a code red." Behind Kyle, the family stopped moving. Vanessa froze mid-selfie. My mother stopped fanning herself. The air in the lobby shifted from annoyance to spectacle. Everyone was watching. And the show was just beginning. "Run it again," Kyle screamed, his voice cracking with a mixture of panic and rage. "Do not just stand there looking at me like I am a criminal. Run the damn card again. It is a glitch. Your system is cheap. It is probably offline due to the heat." The receptionist, Sarah, did not flinch. She had dealt with entitled tourists before, but this was different. This was the desperation of a man who knows the walls are closing in. She pressed the button one more time. The machine made that same soul-crushing buzzing sound. The red light flashed, declined. "Try this one," Kyle shouted, fumbling with his Velcro wallet. He pulled out a blue personal Visa card. It was cracked at the corner and dirty. "Try this one. It has a $10,000 limit." Sarah took it with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated evidence. She swiped it. Declined. Insufficient funds. Kyle threw another card on the counter. A MasterCard. Declined. Account frozen by issuer. He threw a gas station credit card. Declined. The silence in the lobby was deafening. The 10 members of the Johnson family stood frozen. My parents looked like statues of misery. The children had stopped running and were staring at their father with wide, fearful eyes. The other guests in the line were whispering. I could see phones coming out. People were recording. This was going to be on TikTok before they even left the building. The hashtag would probably be fake rich meltdown. Sir, please step away from the counter, Sarah said, her voice dropping an octave. You are holding up the line and you do not have a valid form of payment. I am not going anywhere, Kyle roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. I booked the presidential suite. I demand to speak to a manager. We are the managers, 2 deep voices said in unison. 2 large security officers had materialized behind Kyle. They were not the friendly greeters at the door. These were the men who handled the problems. They wore dark suits and earpieces, and they looked like they could bench press Kyle without breaking a sweat. Sir, we need you to step aside, one of the guards said, stepping into Kyle's personal space. You are causing a disturbance. If you cannot pay, you need to vacate the premises immediately. Kyle shrank. All the air went out of his chest. He looked at the guards, then at the receptionist, then at his pile of useless plastic on the counter. He looked small. He looked broke. Vanessa watched him crumble. She looked at the declined cards. She looked at the red alert on the screen, and then the gears in her head finally turned. She realized why the business card had failed. She realized why the personal cards linked to the same address and credit profile were freezing up. She realized who held the strings. It is her, Vanessa screamed. The sound was shrill and pierced the lobby like a siren. She pushed past my mother, nearly knocking her over. She grabbed Kyle by the lapels of his neon tracksuit and shook him. It is Monique, she shrieked, her eyes bulging. She did this. She is the guarantor on the business card. She is the only one who can freeze it. She blocked us, Kyle. She blocked everything. Kyle looked at her, dazed. Monique. But she wouldn't. She is family. She is not family right now, Vanessa hissed, spinning around to face the group. She is the one holding the kill switch. She knew we were checking in at 12. Vanessa scrambled for her purse. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped her lipstick on the floor. She clawed for her phone. Call her, she yelled at Kyle, at my parents, at anyone who would listen. Call her right now. Put her on speaker. She is the only one who can fix this. She is the only one who can authorize the charge. My mother began to cry. My father looked pale. They realized they were stranded in a 5-star lobby with 10 people and $0. Call her, Vanessa screamed again, dialing my number with furious, stabbing motions. Tell her if she does not pick up, I will kill her. I watched the phone in my hand buzz. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Let them sweat, I whispered. Let them sweat. The phone vibrated against the white linen tablecloth. It danced across the surface like an angry beetle, buzzing with a desperation that I could feel through the glass. 10 missed calls. 11. 12. The names flashed on the screen in a frantic loop. Vanessa. Kyle. Dad. Mom. They were blowing up my phone with the panic of people who had just realized the parachute was not opening. I took another bite of my lobster tail. It was poached in saffron butter and it melted in my mouth. It tasted like vindication. I chewed slowly, savoring the flavor while the phone buzzed again. I looked behind me. Through the massive curved glass wall of the underwater dining room, 2 dolphins were playing catch with a piece of kelp. They spun and twirled their sleek gray bodies, catching the light that filtered down from the surface. It was a scene from a movie. It was the kind of view that cost more than my brother-in-law made in a year. On the 15th ring, I decided they had suffered enough. Or rather, I decided I was ready to let them see me. I wiped the corner of my mouth with a heavy silk napkin. I picked up the phone. I did not press the green button for a voice call. I pressed the video icon. I wanted them to see. I wanted them to witness the upgrade. The call connected instantly. The screen split. On the top half was my face, cool and collected, framed by the azure blue of the water and the dancing dolphins. On the bottom half was chaos. I saw them. They were huddled around the phone in the center of the hotel lobby, like survivors of a shipwreck fighting over a ration bar. The angle was unflattering, looking up at their double chins and their nostrils. Kyle's face was a map of rage. His skin was blotchy and purple. Sweat was dripping down his forehead, matting his hair to his skull. Vanessa was behind him, her eyes wild, her makeup starting to run in the humidity. Kyle did not say hello. He did not ask how I was. He screamed so loud that the audio on my phone clipped and distorted. "Monique, you crazy witch, what did you do? What did you do to my cards? We are standing at the front desk and everything is declined. You cut us off." I held the phone steady. I took a sip of my iced tea, the ice cubes clinking softly. I made sure to angle the camera so they could see the lobster shell on my plate. I made sure they could see the massive dolphin gliding right over my shoulder, its eye looking directly into the lens. "Hello, Kyle," I said, my voice smooth and unbothered. "Hello, Vanessa. You look a little stressed. Is the check-in process not going smoothly?" I thought elite VIPs breezed right through. "Don't play games with me, Monique," Kyle roared, saliva flying from his mouth and hitting his phone screen. "I know you did this. The bank said the guarantor flagged the account for fraud. You are the guarantor. You froze my money. Fix it. Fix it right now, or I swear to God I will." "You will what, Kyle?" I interrupted softly. "You will sue me with the money you do not have. You will hire a lawyer with the credit card that just bounced. You are screaming at the person who owns your debt. You might want to lower your voice before security drags you out." "It is not a background," Vanessa screeched from behind him, pointing at my screen. "Look at the background, Kyle. That is not a zoom filter. That is real water." "Where is she?" I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. "I am glad you asked," I said. "Why don't you turn around? I am closer than you think." I hung up the phone. The screen went black. I stood up. I smoothed down my silk dress. I looked at Jalen, who was sitting across from me, grinning from ear to ear. "Ready for the main event, baby?" I asked. He nodded. "Let us go say hello to the family." "Hang tight," I said to the dark screen of my phone, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet hallway. "I am closer than you think. In fact, I am right behind the velvet rope." I signaled to the guard standing at the heavy mahogany doors. These were the doors located directly behind the main reception desk. Most guests did not even notice them. They had no handles on the outside and no signage. They were the portal to the Ultra VIP Lounge, a space reserved for celebrities, royalty, and people who could buy the hotel if they felt like it. The guard nodded and pressed a button. The magnetic locks disengaged with a heavy thud that sounded like a vault opening. The doors swung outward slowly and dramatically, revealing the chaotic, bright lobby to us, and revealing us to the lobby. Jalen stepped out first. He was no longer the boy in the oversized t-shirt counting crumpled dollar bills. He was wearing the cream-colored Italian linen suit we had bought in Chicago. It was tailored to perfection, hugging his small frame, with a casual elegance that money usually cannot buy. He wore the hand-stitched leather loafers without socks, just like the stylist had suggested. He adjusted his glasses with a confident flick of his wrist. He did not look down. He did not shuffle. He looked like a prince surveying his kingdom. He looked like a young CEO in training. I walked beside him. My silk dress flowed around me like liquid money. I held my head high, my expression cool and unbothered. We were not alone. Flanking us were two private security officers, large men with earpieces, who moved with the silent lethality of panthers. Walking slightly ahead of us was a man in an impeccable gray three-piece suit. It was Mr. Henderson, the resort director. He was the man who ran the entire operation, the man Kyle had been screaming to see just moments ago. But Mr. Henderson was not looking at Kyle. He was bowing to us. Ms. Williams. Mr. Henderson said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence of the lobby. I apologize for the disturbance out here. We can have security clear a path to your limousine if you prefer not to walk through the crowd. I stopped walking. I stood at the top of the small set of stairs that led down to the main floor. The elevation gave me the perfect vantage point. The silence that fell over the lobby was absolute. It started at the front desk and rippled outward until even the crying babies seemed to hold their breath. Kyle stood there frozen. His hand was still half raised, reaching for the manager he thought he deserved. He was wearing his neon tracksuit, which suddenly looked cheap and ridiculous against the backdrop of real luxury. His face was slick with sweat. His mouth hung open. Vanessa was standing behind him, clutching her fake designer bag. She looked at me, then she looked at Jalen. Her eyes widened until I thought they might pop out of her head. She looked at the linen suit. She looked at the deference the staff was showing us. She looked at the woman she had called poor and the boy she had called rough. The contrast was brutal. On one side was a sweaty, screaming family surrounded by declined credit cards and humiliated children. On the other side was elegance, calm, and the undeniable aura of power. I locked eyes with Kyle. I did not scream. I did not frown. I just raised one eyebrow. "Hello, family," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a diamond cutter. "I hear you are having some trouble with the check-in process. Such a shame." The silence in the lobby did not last. It shattered like a dropped glass. The shock on Kyle's face curdled instantly into a blind red fury. He looked at Jalen in his custom linen suit. He looked at me in my silk dress. He looked at the resort director bowing to us. The humiliation was too much for his ego to process. He snapped. "You think you are funny, Monique?" He screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "You think you can embarrass me in front of my family?" He lunged. He moved with the desperate clumsiness of a man who has lost control. He rushed up the 3 small stairs toward the VIP platform, reaching for the phone in my hand. His fingers were clawed. He wanted to smash the device. He wanted to smash the evidence. "Give me that phone," he roared. "Undo it. Undo it right now, you witch." He never reached me. He never even got close. The security officer on my left moved with a speed that defied his size. He stepped forward, one clean, fluid motion. He did not punch Kyle. He did not tackle him. He simply intercepted him. He caught Kyle's wrist in midair. He twisted. There was a sharp yelp of pain. Kyle spun around, forced by the leverage of his own momentum. The guard drove Kyle's arm up behind his back, locking the shoulder joint. It was a professional restraint, cold and efficient. Kyle was forced to bend over, his face pressed against the cool marble of the pillar, his cheek squashed against the stone. "Let me go," Kyle squealed, kicking his legs uselessly. "This is assault. I will sue you. I will sue this whole hotel. Sir, if you struggle, I will be forced to restrain you on the floor." The guard said, his voice calm and bored. "I suggest you remain still." The lobby gasped. Tourists covered their mouths. Phones were recording from every angle. Vanessa screamed a high-pitched wail of horror, clutching her children to her polyester leggings. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I stepped forward. I looked down at my brother-in-law, pinned against the column like a butterfly on a mounting board. Then I looked at my parents, who were staring at me with horror and confusion. "You want to know why the cards declined?" I asked, my voice steady and clear. "You want to know why you are homeless in Orlando?" I unlocked my phone. I opened the email from the bank. The one titled Notice of Acceleration and Fraud Investigation. I turned the screen outward. I held it up like a lantern in the darkness. I walked down one step so my parents could see it clearly. "Read it," I said. "Read the highlighted section." My father squinted. He read the words out loud, his voice trembling. Reason for termination. Misappropriation of business funds for personal use. Unauthorized transaction. SeaWorld Elite Package, $15,000. I swiped the screen. And this one, I said. Unauthorized withdrawal from Medical Emergency Trust. Recipient Vanessa Johnson. Purpose, luxury retail and spa services. Amount $20,000. I looked at my mother. She went pale. She looked at Vanessa. You told me you needed money for the house, Mama whispered. You told me the roof was leaking. I held the phone closer to Kyle's face. I did not cut you off, Kyle, I said. You cut yourself off. You stole from the business. You stole from the family. And you thought I was too stupid to notice. I looked at the crowd. This man is not a VIP, I announced. He is a fraud. And his credit limit just hit 0. I stepped closer to Kyle. The security guard still had his arm twisted behind his back, forcing him to listen. I held the phone steadily in front of his face so he could not look away from the consequences of his own greed. The lobby was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning and the terrified breathing of my sister. Let me explain this to you clearly, Kyle, so there is no confusion. I said, my voice calm and clinical, like a surgeon diagnosing a terminal illness. You treated a business line of credit like a personal piggy bank. You signed a contract stating that these funds were for renovation and real estate acquisition only. I swiped the screen to the next page of the document. SeaWorld is not real estate. Chanel is not renovation. That is called breach of contract. But because you are the director of the company, it is also called fraud. And when the bank detects fraud, they do not just decline the transaction, they trigger a safety mechanism. I looked at my parents who were huddled together watching me with wide, fearful eyes. They needed to hear this too. It is called the acceleration clause, I said, letting the words hang in the air. It is standard in every commercial loan agreement. It means that because you broke the rules, the payment plan is over. The bank is no longer willing to wait for monthly installments. They do not trust you to pay them back over time because you are stealing from them right now. Kyle grunted, trying to pull away, but the guard tightened his grip. So here's the math, I continued. You do not just owe the $15,000 for this trip. You owe the $4,000 for the bag. You owe the $2,000 for the watch. You owe every single penny you have siphoned off for the last 2 years. The bank has called the loan, Kyle. I leaned in closer. The total outstanding balance is $50,000. And it is not due next month. It is not due next week. It is due immediately. Vanessa let out a small whimper. 50,000. We do not have 50,000. I looked at her. I know you don't, but you better find it. I turned back to Kyle. You have exactly 24 hours to wire the full amount to the bank. If the funds are not received by noon tomorrow, the bank moves to the next step of recovery. I paused. This was the blow that would hurt the most. This was the secret he had kept from everyone. You didn't just sign with your signature, Kyle. You signed with collateral. You didn't have any assets of your own, so you used a power of attorney to pledge the only asset available to you. I looked at the elderly couple standing behind Vanessa. I looked at the parents of the man who was currently pinned against a marble column. You pledged your parents' house, I said softly. The color drained from Kyle's face. He stopped struggling. If that $50,000 is not paid by tomorrow, the bank will initiate foreclosure proceedings on your parents' home. They will seize the property to cover your debt. A scream pierced the air. It came from Kyle's mother. She collapsed onto a suitcase, clutching her chest. You gambled with their roof, I said, standing tall. And you lost. I signaled to the guard. You can let him go now. He needs to start making phone calls. The guard released him. Kyle slumped to the floor, rubbing his shoulder. He looked up at me with pure hatred, but also with terror. Monique, please, he whispered. I turned my back on him. Tick-tock, Kyle. You have 24 hours. I suggest you start selling that watch. My mother's face was a mask of conflicting emotions. She looked at Vanessa, the favorite daughter who had just looted her life savings for a spa day. You would think she would scream. You would think she would slap her face. But habits run deep. Denial is a powerful drug. Instead of turning on the thief, she turned on the police. She reached out and grabbed my arm. Her grip was weak, trembling. Monique, she pleaded, her voice cracking. Baby, please, don't do this. We can figure out the money later. Just fix it. For now, fix it for your father. My father nodded, leaning on his cane, looking suddenly frail and old. He looked at the security guards, then back at me with watery eyes. Yes, Monique, he said. Don't be cruel. This is a family vacation. We are all here together. Let us not ruin the memories over money. We can talk about the debt when we get home. Just unlock the card, please. For the family. The audacity. The sheer, unadulterated gall. They were standing in the wreckage of a crime committed against them, and they were asking the investigator to tamper with the evidence. They wanted me to pay for the privilege of being robbed. They wanted me to save the people who had stolen their medicine money just so they could keep up appearances in a hotel lobby. I pulled my arm away. It wasn't a violent jerk. It was a slow, deliberate removal of contact. I stepped back, creating a physical distance that matched the emotional chasm between us. I looked down at Jalen. He was watching me, his eyes clear behind his glasses. He wasn't scared anymore. He was proud. He saw me standing up. He saw his mother finally drawing the line. I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of the linen suit. You are right, I said, my voice soft enough that they had to lean in to hear it. This is a vacation. A very special one. I looked at my parents, then at Kyle, rubbing his shoulder on the floor, then at Vanessa, weeping over her declined credit cards. But you are confused about the guest list, I continued. I pointed a manicured finger at Jalen. This is my family, I said. This boy right here, the one you forgot, the one you excluded, the one you mocked. He is my responsibility. He is my priority. I looked them in the eye. My gaze was dry. My heart was light. You people, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. You are not family. You are liabilities. You are scammers who share my last name. And I do not negotiate with scammers. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't wait for the wailing to start again. I didn't wait for the guilt trips or the biblical quotes. Come on, Jalen, I said, turning my back on them. Our table is waiting, and I believe they are serving dessert. We walked back up the small stairs toward the mahogany doors. We did not look back. Mr. Henderson nodded to the security guard. The guard pressed the button. The heavy doors began to swing shut. Through the narrowing gap, I saw them one last time. A tableau of misery. Frozen in the bright, harsh light of the public lobby, surrounded by their luggage and their lies, the gap got smaller, smaller, and then with a soft final thud they were gone. The lock clicked shut. The silence returned. I took a deep breath. It smelled of orchids and freedom. I looked at Jalen. Let's go eat, I said. He smiled. Yes, Mom. Let's eat. The heavy mahogany doors clicked shut, sealing my family out of the world of luxury and back into the harsh reality of consequences. I did not see it happen, but I know exactly how the scene played out. It is the inevitable physics of finance. When the money stops, the hospitality ends. Mr. Henderson did not shout. He did not cause a scene. He simply signaled to his staff. The porters who had been waiting to carry their bags to the presidential suite stepped back. The luggage was not loaded onto gold carts. It was left standing on the marble floor. I am afraid we cannot accommodate you without a valid method of payment, Mr. Henderson would have said, his voice cool and final. You have 5 minutes to vacate the lobby before I call the police for trespassing. My mother Beatrice tried to play the hero. She reached into her purse with shaking hands. She pulled out the debit card for the medical emergency fund. She thought she could salvage the trip. She thought she could swipe the card and pay for at least a standard room. She thought there was still $30,000 left in that account. She did not know that I had logged in 10 minutes ago. She did not know that the moment I saw the transaction for Vanessa's swimwear, I had transferred the remaining balance to a secure trust account that only I could access. I had drained the swamp to stop the mosquitoes from breeding. She swiped the card. The machine buzzed. Insufficient funds. The look on her face must have been devastating. The realization that the well was truly dry. They were escorted out, not to a limousine, not even to the shuttle bus. They were guided to the curb where they had to call 2 Uber XLs using a credit card my father had hidden in his sock drawer that was nearly maxed out. They did not go to another resort. They could not afford the resort fees. They drove. They drove away from the manicured lawns and the dolphin fountains. They drove past the nice hotels. They drove past the mediocre hotels. They drove 20 miles out to the edge of the highway where the streetlights flicker and the grass grows through the cracks in the pavement. They checked into the Sunshine Motor Inn. It was a cruel name. There was no sunshine. The paint was peeling in long gray strips like dead skin. The pool was empty and filled with old leaves. The sign out front had a missing letter, so it just read, Motel. They rented 2 rooms for 10 people. I can picture them now, squeezed into those small, damp rooms that smell of stale cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner. Kyle sitting on a bed with a sagging mattress staring at the wall. Vanessa trying to kill a cockroach in the bathroom with her expensive fake designer shoe. The children crying because the Wi-Fi does not work and the TV only has 4 channels. There is no room service. There is no concierge. Dinner was not the surf and turf buffet they had promised the kids. Dinner was a trip to the gas station across the street. I imagine them boiling water in the small stained coffee pot by the sink. I imagine the smell of cheap instant noodles filling the room, mixing with the smell of regret. Vanessa probably tried to post a picture, maybe a close-up of her face so no one could see the water stains on the ceiling, but she knew. They all knew. They were eating styrofoam cup noodles while sitting on a polyester bedspread that had not been properly washed in a decade. Meanwhile, 20 miles away, I was slicing into a piece of key lime pie while a dolphin watched me eat. Justice, I realized, tastes remarkably sweet. And it is best served cold. The landing was rougher than the flight. When we returned to Atlanta, the legal system was waiting. The bank did not treat Kyle's spending spree as a misunderstanding. They treated it as criminal fraud. The lawsuit was filed within 48 hours. They did not just want the money back, they wanted justice. The acceleration clause was enforced with ruthless efficiency. The foreclosure sign went up on the front lawn of that McMansion they were so proud of before the week was over. It was a house of cards built on debt and deceit, and the wind had finally blown it down. Neighbors slowed their cars to watch the movers carry out the velvet sofas and the fake art. It was a spectacle. But I knew that for Vanessa, losing the house was not the worst part. Losing the audience was the true death sentence. I decided to speed up the process. I made a small anonymous phone call to a popular local lifestyle blogger who loved a good scandal. I sent over the public court documents and the foreclosure notice. The headline the next day was devastating. The fake life of Atlanta's elite exposed. The article went viral in our local circle. All those high society friends she tried so hard to impress did not offer help. They blocked her. She was social poison. Her follower count dropped to 0 overnight. Yesterday I stopped by the local discount grocery store. I did not need anything really. I just wanted to see. And there she was, Vanessa. She was wearing a red polyester vest. She was standing at register 4, scanning cans of beans. Beep, beep, beep. She looked up and saw me standing in the express lane. She saw my piece. She saw that I was happy. She did not say a word. She just looked down and kept scanning. She was finally earning an honest living. It was the most authentic thing she had ever done. It was a rainy Tuesday when they showed up at my door. My parents looked small. They looked like strangers wearing the clothes of people I used to know. My father was not holding his cane with authority anymore. He was clutching a wet hat in his hands, wringing the brim like a nervous schoolboy. My mother's eyes were red and swollen from days of crying. They did not wait for me to invite them in. They just started talking. They started begging. "Monique, please." My mother sobbed, reaching out a hand that I did not take. "We have nowhere to go. Kyle's house is gone. They took the furniture. They took the car. We are staying in a motel, Monique. A motel with bugs. You have to help us. We are your parents. We raised you." My father chimed in, his voice shaking. "We made a mistake, Monique. A terrible mistake. But you cannot leave us out on the street. We are family. God forgives Monique. You should forgive too." I looked at them. I looked at the people who had taught me to be afraid of poverty while spending every dime I earned. I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The sadness was gone. There was only a hollow space where my obligation used to be. I reached into the pocket of my blazer. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the transaction receipt from the medical fund, the $20,000 they had wired to Vanessa. I held it up so they could see the numbers. "This was your safety net," I said, my voice quiet and steady. "This was the money for your hearts, for your backs, for your lives. You stole it. You stole it to buy swimsuits and fake lashes. That is not a mistake, Daddy. That is theft." They went silent. They stared at the paper, unable to meet my eyes. "I could go to the police," I continued. "I could file charges for elder financial abuse against Vanessa and name you as accomplices. I could have you arrested for fraud." My mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "But I won't," I said, refolding the paper and putting it back in my pocket. "That is my final gift to you. That is my last act of mercy. I am not going to put you in jail. But I am not going to put you in my house either." I took a step back into the foyer. "Do not call me," I said. "Do not come to my office. Do not look for Jalen. I have changed my phone number. I have instructed security at my building and my firm to turn you away. You chose your favorite child. Now you can live with the consequences of her choices." "But Monique," my father started. "Goodbye," I said. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. The sound was loud and final. I listened to their footsteps fade away down the hall. It was the sound of a heavy burden finally being set down. 1 week later, I sat on the balcony of our new penthouse. We were on the 45th floor. The city lights twinkled below us like diamonds spread on black velvet. The air was cool and crisp. Jalen sat next to me, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, holding a mug of steaming hot cocoa. He looked peaceful. He looked safe. He didn't look like a victim anymore. "Mom," he asked, looking out at the skyline, "is it over?" I took a sip of my drink. It was sweet and warm. "Yes, baby," I said, smiling. "It is finally over. We are free." We sat there in the silence, high above the noise of the world. And for the first time in my life, the silence did not feel lonely. It felt like victory. This story serves as a powerful reminder that true value is never found in loud logos or performative wealth, but in quiet confidence, financial literacy, and integrity. Monique demonstrates that allowing toxic family members to disrespect you under the guise of obligation is a bankruptcy of the soul. We learn that "no" is a complete sentence, and that protecting your peace and your children is more important than maintaining appearances. Ultimately, the story teaches us that you must stop watering dead plants. When you cut off the people draining your resources, you finally create the space to bloom. Stop setting yourself on fire to keep people warm who wouldn't even give you a blanket. Hit like and subscribe if you are ready to cut the dead weight. Reclaim your value and build a life so successful that their opinion no longer matters.